Cool. So, what's your name, and what's your company?
All right. My name is Ryan Hume, and I am one half of Acid Rain Technology. And we're a small music technology company in Seattle and Portland. My business partner, Michael, lives down in Portland. And we make Eurorack modules right now. We may make other stuff in the future. Give our little elevator pitch. It's like we're kind of focused on live, so to speak, performance interface with music tech, and like the kind of that interface point between the human and the machine, and how that can influence the creative process and allow you to make decisions and have the machine create a feedback loop with yourself to come up with maybe new ideas that you wouldn't have just come up with only in your head. Yeah. That's
extremely prevalent as a design aesthetic in the little tiny bit that I've gotten a chance to play with Maestro. Nice. I hooked it up yesterday, and I've been playing with it today, and I haven't wrapped my head completely around it yet, but the combination of well, first of all, the complex modulation chains, and we'll get into this a little bit more. I just wanted to gush a little bit, but like the bank loading, normally I don't save anything when it comes to Eurorack. Like once my patch is done and I've performed, it's done. Like I just like, okay, whatever. But I think with Maestro, I think being able to load like 6 separate chains of complex modulation is going to be like a performance dream. I think that's going to be really, really cool.
Yeah, I hope to see, as these Maestros get out into the wild, I hope to see them in streams a little more, and like see people actually using them in, I guess I think of it as like kind of from in like a sports metaphor, like high performance situations where you're playing live and you gotta like, gotta switch right away, and being able to switch 6 things at once can really I think it's a nice tool in your toolkit to surprise the audience or listener. Yeah,
we're jumping the gun a little bit because I do want to talk about. I mean, I guess let's just fuck it. Let's just jump into Maestro now. Sure. We'll get back to the rest of the questions later, because I think you brought up a really, really good point about like when you're performing with Eurorack, there's a lot. Well, I mean, any hardware, but I think with Eurorack specifically, you have a lot that you want to be able to touch at once, but you only have 2 hands. Exactly. And we can set up all kinds of complex chains to help us with this, using like tetrapads and stuff like that, or just there's lots of options out there. But Maestro specifically seems to offer a kind of turn on a dime aesthetic that when I first like started to understand what was going on, and then I went for a jog and was thinking about it, I'm like, I've got this streaming set coming up at some point in 2021 for the New York Modular Society, and I'm like, I've often bulked away from the idea of doing straight up live stuff instead of like sort of building a patch and recording it and submitting it to a live stream. But I'm like, with this, I can use modulation as a strong way of actually changing the concept of song or full track, which I think is a really, really wild idea.
Totally.
I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. We're hoping to be able to facilitate, long term as we release other controller modules and various sequencing pitch data ideas, facilitate kind of my dream is to be able to step up to the rack with like nothing pre-prepared and just start making enjoyable sound from like minute 1. So we're hoping the Maestro can can facilitate some of that as you build chains and modulation up, and then save it, and then modify it, and then save that in another slot, and then go back to your first slot. And you don't have to kind of stop everything, save, regroup, and then start again.
Yeah, it's very playable, which I think is really, really cool. You really don't, it doesn't take you out of the moment. And this is from somebody who literally just plugged it in yesterday. Like it's clear that you can on the fly just kind of like create really complex and rich topologies that you can then set loose on your stuff. And I'm like, I was trying to wrap my head around it and the noise engineering LIP at the same time, and I'm like, oh man, these two have to make out. They have to get to know each other a bit more.
It's a great combo.
There's so much dimensionality there. Like there's so much that can happen.
Yeah.
So what's your history with, I guess, both music and technology? Like what's sort of brought you into this convergence that led to the production of not just functional Eurorack modules, but especially Eurorack modules that are geared towards performance? I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. So my history with music and technology, I guess to really go back to the start, it would be middle school or a little before. My dad taught me how to play guitar. You'll see a couple guitars behind me here. And in middle school, I started playing in a band with a couple friends. And when I was in middle school, so this was around like 2000, 2002 or so, home recording gear had just become like affordable and reasonably high quality. So in addition to kind of playing guitar and jamming with friends, I got into the like the recording technology side of music, and I wanted to make my own records, and I think it was Cubase at the time, and with like a weird PCIe sound card trying to hook up a little mixer to it.
Yep.
But it was amazing. I mean, I don't think I don't have the history of computer recording off the top of my head here, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't very easy to do before then. So I feel really lucky to have been able to experience that pretty early on in my musical journey, and kind of engage with music making on a pretty technical level at a young age.
Yeah.
And then really got into it, obviously, like in high school, playing in other bands, recording my own band and friends' bands, learning about mixing, and then you start to go down like the gear bunny trail, where you're like, oh, microphones and oh, like what's a preamp, and these things are designed, by electrical engineers, and someone gets to make them. And then I went to college for industrial design. I've always been super passionate about building things, making stuff. I would actually say making things is like my primary passion, even over making music in a way. So this has been a great, fortunate confluence of those two things, being able to do Acid Rain. So in college, obviously, design school is kind of crazy. Didn't have a lot of time for music at the time, so that kind of fell off. And then it was after I graduated from college when electronic music was really taking off in the United States, at least on a bit more of a mainstream level, where I found out about it.
If you don't mind asking, how old are you?
I'm 31 now, so
okay.
This would have been like 2012 or so.
Yeah. The sort of like electronica heyday when, well, actually, wait, was 2012 was actually the EDM sort of like blossoming. That was like post Prodigy, all that kind of stuff. This was the next round of it.
Kind of the American EDM craze started to pick up then. I remember hearing Skrillex for the first time in college, like in the design studio. Somebody put it on, and I had, we're all used to that sound now. It's kind of been run over and beaten to death at this point, but it was pretty wild at the time. If you can,
oh no, totally.
yeah, think back to, I remember that was coming, at least where I went to school I went to a college up in Bellingham, north of Seattle, and that Skrillex was coming pretty much straight out of like the indie rock movement at that point. So it's this massive.
It was underground. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a little bit, it was before it had really taken off in the mainstream. And then, after graduating school, I was fortunate to get a job in industrial design and like the housewares industry. So doing that during the day, but then finally having some time at night to make music and get back into it, and a little bit more money, having a real job. And so I kind of got into the gear, as many of us do,
as one does,
learning about synthesizers. And
what was your first sort of like foray into it? Because I'm assuming you probably didn't start with Eurorack, though. No. I guess it's possible.
No, I didn't. That took a few more years for me to learn about. I think I started with. Well, obviously a lot of VSTs. Zebra, the UHE synth.
Oh yeah,
I think that was kind of formative for me in terms of having a synthesizer of any kind. It is a software synthesizer, but it has a very, very open architecture where you can patch a lot of things into each other and, download these patches that people made, really talented synthesists made online, and then start poking around and looking at the layers upon layers of modulation and complexity built into these patches. And I think that made me, that was like the first time it clicked for me that, like a keyboard sound isn't just like a black box. It's, it's not just a preset. It's these discrete components of simple waveforms and parameters, oscillators modulating each other, and kind of opened up that door for me to check out. And then I was producing a lot of music back then, so I got really into like the like some 80s synthesizers. Like I got a DX7 and D550, like the rack, kind of like really cheesy 80s movie soundtrack synth. And
so that's actually, I'd love to get your take on like because when you were talking about Zebra and how it exposes everything, my initial thought was like, man, like exactly the opposite of something like the DX7. So what was that like trying to, once you saw sort of the potential of something like Zebra, where you really saw all this stuff exposed, and then you exposed yourself to something that's like as obtuse as the DX7. Was that a bit of a shock, like trying to rectify like the complex but also simplicity in terms of layout that something like Zebra had versus the DX7?
Yeah, I don't think I really understood any of it at the time. Honestly, I think I certainly never tried to program it was actually a little TX7 desktop unit.
The little desktop one. Yeah, those are super awesome.
And I was collecting those synthesizers, like especially the 80s stuff, almost like Pokemon cards. for my music production, because I got really into like the deep history of music production of a lot of like 1980s pop music and house and techno later on in the 90s, and learning about all the exact gear that was used in a bunch of tracks that I really admired, and then trying to eBay score those same pieces, for affordable prices, and see kind of like, well, how could I fit that sort of more of a pre-existing puzzle piece into my own productions, which you could almost zoom out and look at it as like meta modular synths, where it's like whole synthesizers being used in a production as like, I'm building Ryan's big rig that makes the music that I make. Yeah. But then, yeah, Zebra,
I'm just trying to imagine, like, did you have like a huge place at that point?
No. Oh,
or just a very
like
cluttered
tiny
place
desk with all this crap stacked on top of each other. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Zebra actually, it was funny. I was really bad at Zebra at first. Like, I would download these patches and they sound so cool. And I'm like, how are they making these things? I couldn't even synthesize a kick drum with it. I just couldn't get it, couldn't figure it out. And I think that's where a lot of people start. It's, it actually took hardware modular, so Eurorack, to get me up to the place where then I could actually go back into Zebra and use it.
I completely understand that. I had a Roland Juno Alpha for a bit. I think it was actually my first hardware synth. And, they took everything about the Juno and put it in a, DX7 sort of package. And the only thing I knew how to do was turn the big knob that changed the cutoff frequency. Like, I could not figure out what the fuck was going on with that synth.
Right.
And then it like, same as you're saying, like it wasn't until modular that like I started to appreciate software synths like Pigments a lot more, like where I was like, oh, I actually kind of know some stuff that I'd like to do in this, as opposed to just sort of like staring at the interface like it's an alien UI or something like that. It really exposed a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I always point people towards VCV Rack if they're thinking about getting into modular these days, because I think it's a much more one-to-one sort of model of Eurorack hardware in software. And it's a little easier then to see like what's being patched exactly into what, versus a lot of the synths like Zebra, they're super powerful, but they've got, to patch something to something else, it's like a drop-down menu. And, it's not like, if you don't read the manual cover to cover and know what they're talking about, it can be hard. It can be hard at first to figure it out.
Modulation matrices and how they are implemented, I think, is one of the most interesting and important ways a synth can actually be usable, almost more so than anything else.
Absolutely. And I think all of what we're talking about here in my history in dealing with these various approaches to synthesis kind of influence my thinking on developing new products for Acid Rain now, and trying to make them as immediate and like shallow in terms of cognitive load as possible. Cause, that's something that I think I struggled with certain instruments, kind of.
UI is so weird, in that, especially once you've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of getting to know certain things really well, there's this expectation that other things will work similarly. And when something doesn't, you're like, this is fucking terrible, and I'm never using this again. With Maestro, I'm happy to report, like, I like looked at it, I glanced at the little manual sheet that comes with it, and I'm like, all right, this actually is being implemented how I thought it would, like in terms of the button pressing and chaining and stuff like that. So that was really cool. Nice job.
Thank you. That brings us most of the way up till today. I guess, do we want to get into like how I started Acid Rain? Oh,
absolutely. Yes, please.
Yeah. So yeah, got into Eurorack eventually. Went down first got like I think it was like a Arturia Mini Brute. So you could do a little bit of sound design and analog kind of patch building, and then got like a little rack to integrate with that, and then it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing, and eventually like abandoned the Mini Brute and just was only using sequencers and kind of in-rack stuff. And bought a lot of stuff, sold a lot of stuff.
Tale as old as time.
Exactly. It can be expensive to, they're not only reasonably expensive products, but it can be expensive to get to the point where you know what you really like in Eurorack. And that's
another argument, I guess, for VCV Rack to an extent.
Totally. At least to know like kind of where you want to go with it. so that you can steer some of your purchasing decisions. And
I agree.
I would say now, particularly thanks to people like you, YouTube is so much more vibrant and it makes it so much more easy to understand new modules and get multiple takes on how people are using them.
It's wonderful. Yeah, I like being able to when I'm considering a new module, I'll go to DivKid's YouTube and be like, oh yeah, thank God, there it is.
Totally.
I'm going to go for a walk and get to know this module a bit.
Yeah, and you can see the step-by-step feature walkthrough. You can see just a live jam that doesn't explain anything, an ambient piece. When I first started modular, it's probably in 2015 or something like that. There were some random YouTube videos kind of bouncing around, and you could maybe find one, but certainly nothing like today. And I think that's it's a wonderful resource for people starting out.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, we are blessed with a lot of very talented explainers and creators and everything in between.
Totally. So let's see. Keep wandering off topic.
What eventually led you to Acid Rain besides just buying a lot of Eurorec?
Yeah, obviously getting deep into it as a hobby, and then I was riding the bus home one day from work, and I think at this point, so probably early 2018, I had never met anyone else in Seattle who was interested in Eurorec, not in person, at least. I had gone to a few Patchworks. They only had meetups at the time. They didn't have a store yet. And so it was just only myself online buying things, playing with them at home. And I hear right behind me on the bus somebody talking about Eurorec, which I just thought was what the heck? This is this thing I'm obsessed with, and there's someone else. So of course, you would obviously know, unlike Seattle, I actually turn around and talk to somebody on the bus. Yeah, for all the viewers out there.
Did you mention control voltage?
Exactly.
Let's have a chat.
Seattle doesn't have a reputation for being the most social place in that sense.
But if you're gonna bond over something, on the bus, I can't think of a better thing.
And that was Michael, who I now have run Acid Rain with, and his friend. So yeah, we met on a Seattle City bus, exchanged contact info, and just started, hanging out after work most weeks after that. And I am an industrial designer, and my background is I was in a housewares company making beverage products, but have a lot of experience in manufacturing and sourcing parts and manufacturing things, assembling things, selling products, and understanding running a product business. And he, at the time, was working at Google as a software and electrical engineer. So it was
a great
a match
combination
made in
of energies. Yeah, no kidding.
Totally. It was kind of like a lightning bolt meeting each other.
That's crazy.
And finding out that we had these complementary skill sets. And the next kind of the obvious thing from there was, okay, well, we can probably make one of these things, right? Because we had a lot of ideas, and he had the hard skills in order to put them together. So we made the Switchblade, was our first product. I think probably like most Eurorack companies, especially, totally just to scratch our own itch. We were like, why aren't there other switch options that let you change the switching behavior and keeping it small so it fits in like a performance case? That's something we think about a lot designing our modules. Is I have pretty strong feelings about 6 or 7U and 104 HP being like the perfect size for a Eurorack instrument. I know some people love the monster cases and giant walls, and I think if that works for you, that's fantastic. It never
There's
has
something
for
to be
me.
said for like focus cases, whether or not you have like the gigantic wall of science equipment that's your friend. Like, I actually have a lot more fun. I'm a lot more creative a lot of the time and feel a lot more experimental when I'm dealing with a smaller case that is a little bit more purpose built.
Yeah, I'm the same, and kind of looking at the case as a composition in and of itself, where every module has a really particular purpose that you're getting a lot of use and value out of it in that
Absolutely.
in that composition. So, yeah, we came out with the Switchblade. We, we just thought, just prototyped it and got it to work. And we thought, well, why don't we try making a few of these and see if anyone wants to buy it? We knew that some of the other Eurorack companies were really small companies and didn't seem like a huge barrier for us to give that a try at least. And we ended up getting some of them manufactured and selling them. And I have to give enormous credit to some of the retailers, especially like Perfect Circuit and Schneider's, and I believe Patchworks as well, very early on, just picked up our MIDI Amsterdam too. Got to give the shout outs. They
Nice.
They picked up our first module within a month of making them. And
That's awesome.
I think that's something it's really special about the Eurorack industry, and that the dealers are willing to really take a chance on new and interesting stuff. And I think that's why we have such a diverse and colorful assortment of products to choose from in this world.
I am constantly amazed by the diversity of approaches to even the same thing within the context of Eurorack, and I think that's really, really cool.
Totally, we look at it as kind of like an X and Y, like Cartesian space of ways to make sound and ways to control a module, and you can make a module in any point in that space. So two modules could make the same sound but be wildly different in terms of how they're handled or how you use them, or they could be almost physically identical but make completely different sounds. And yeah, it creates a kind of a Cambrian explosion of possibilities and ideas that people are able to not only make one little prototype of, but actually make a small run of them and get them out into the world and see what people do with them. So I feel very lucky.
Speaking
to have
of products getting to the world, is the 3U to 1U panel on the Acid Rain site, is that what you were just working on? Did you just put that up there recently?
Yeah, I made some for myself because I got a little palette case. I wanted an even smaller case to make focused like demo videos and whatnot.
Cool.
The 1U modules are a bit hard to come by these days. Manufacturing is
IntelliGel is having a hard time, I feel like, keeping up with demand.
Everyone is right now. It's quite a tricky thing. We feel so, I'm sure I can speak for other Eurorack manufacturers, that we feel so lucky to have all of this demand and everyone supporting the community during this crazy time. But actually getting things manufactured at the
other story
is really hard. Yeah, because we're all kind of to shift gears a little bit. We're all making these things at like a scale that's not tiny for our tiny little company, but it's tiny on the scale of like consumer electronics manufacturing.
So convincing some place that does manufacturing that this is worth their time and getting pricing that actually makes sense and priority is like, it's a lot harder for smaller companies. Yeah, that's what's, I think, really kind of interesting to think about. Even like the established companies, I would imagine, like IntelliGel, or established, the ones that have been around for a while and have a large portfolio, Make Noise, like all these places, they're still small companies.
Yeah,
they're not huge.
Yeah, they're oftentimes manufacturing in the same city that they work in. Eurorack actually certainly pre-pandemic, and hopefully as we kind of move towards a vaccine and and get a lot of the country back to work, it employs quite a few people in your local town or local city or countries all over the world where they're making these things. And I think that's also really exciting about Eurorack, that I call it like cottage industry electronics in a way.
I think that's a really, really great way to put it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the manufacturing challenge for us in 2020 has been, thankfully, and we're so grateful that our customers understand that these are like small run products, and they're kind of handmade and like very carefully put together, and are willing to pay a bit of a premium for that. But in turn, we feel we need to deliver really, really high quality in order to meet that price premium. And it's hard to get that kind of quality out of like a contract manufacturer that isn't interested in synthesizers or doesn't know a lot about the particulars of making audio products. So I've been doing a lot of manufacturing myself.
I was going to ask how that works, both from like a prototyping level and all the way up to the actual manufacturing. Like when I look at your stuff, I get the impression of stuff that has been industrially produced. It doesn't have, and this isn't a dig or anything, but it has a very clean, industrially created aesthetic to it. So other modules have more of a sort of handmade, sort of like, this was a very nicely put together DIY kit kind of thing. Yeah. So are you actually getting your hands dirty with reflow and all that kind of stuff, like during the process of making these things?
Yes and no. Yeah, there are a lot of machines involved in making our products. We get all of the teeny tiny surface mount components, like the microcontrollers and capacitors and resistors, are put on by a machine called a pick and place machine. That's done by another company. And then I do most of the hand soldering, so stuffing the big components in and then using like my industrial design background kind of comes into play here with lots of work holding jigs and ways to control the flow of solder and various kind of industrial manufacturing techniques to make sure that, like you said, the end result we do want to look
clean,
very clean, very
Does that mean that all these modules that are going out from Acid Rain actually,
I've touched every single one of them.
Oh wow, that's crazy. I actually would not have guessed that, but I guess that's a testament to your workmanship, and that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, we very carefully test every module too, because these things go all over the world, and it's quite challenging, expensive, and disappointing for somebody to have to send a module back to us that's not working. So, we are human. It's always possible that something will get out the door that's not working, but we do our best to take care of you if that's the case. And
we've jumped around a little bit into like some of the current challenges.
Sure.
Were there any challenges that you faced, like getting off the ground with, first with the Switch, and then was Navigator your next module after that?
Yeah, the Navigator and the Chainsaw kind of came out right at the same time. We went to Super Booth in 2019 and showed those. Got into a DivKid video there, which finally put us on the map as like people would know we exist at that point.
God bless Ben.
Yeah, I know, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And yeah, so we released the Chainsaw, which was kind of a big step forward for us. The Switchblade's kind of a utility module. It's a little more complicated than it seems in that it's digitally controlled analog switching, but the Chainsaw, obviously, it makes sound. It's got voltage control. There's a lot of calibration that goes into that.
Yeah, because the 1 volt per octave is actually quantized, so you actually had to dial that in.
Well,
or the tuning knob is at least in its sort of default mode.
Yeah, it steps in semitones, the tuning encoder, but the inputs themselves aren't quantized. So they'll take any slewed pitch and whatnot.
I gotta try that.
Yeah, it sounds really cool to kind of slide the pitches,
the chords around.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was not terribly challenging to build those modules. I think credit goes to Michael, who's a electrical engineering and software genius. Like, I honestly, I've come up to speed certainly on the electronics manufacturing side of things and kind of the electromechanical larger scale EE stuff. But he is definitely the brains of the operation when it comes to
transferring
design.
from like Google, whatever he was doing there. But like, I mean, and then all of a sudden you're writing like DSP algorithms to generate like super saws. That's a pretty dope jump, honestly.
Yeah. No, it's been fun for both of us. And so we were able to get those out the door without a ton of issues.
Cool.
And let's see the next question here. So something that happened that kind of got us off the ground and was a big win for us was the DivKid chainsaw feature.
That's where I first learned of the module too. Yeah.
Yeah, we were selling a few of them before that, and kind of just, neither of us had left our full-time jobs at that point. We were doing this entirely at night. Nights and weekends, here and there, a couple times a week. But we were both kind of ready to leave our full-time jobs at the time as well, and took the leap. And then shortly afterwards, the DivKid video went up on the chainsaw, and we sold out like immediately. It was
rad.
Crazy. And all of 2020 has just been catch up to that. So
that's wild.
Thank you.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone who's bought a chainsaw and, put their music up that they've made with it online. It's really, really inspiring for us to know that so many people are using it to make music and kind of aren't turned off by the cheesy trance nature of it.
Oh, it sounds good, man. Like, especially through like a filter. And that's what I was mostly playing with. I took the ensemble oscillator out of my like techno rack and put the chainsaw in, because I'm like, okay, well, I want some polyphony of some kind, or implied polyphony, and running it through a filter with an envelope just is like a really classic sound. This is sort of jumping a little bit forward, but since we are talking about the chainsaw, I think there's two things that are unique about it. One of which is just fun and the fact that it's stereo. And the second, though, is that, 3 1 volt per octave ends is necessary, but also difficult for some people, I think, maybe to wrangle their head around, including me to an extent. I was using Shifty to hawk it stuff and shift register stuff from sequence from Renee into it, which worked. And I have an architect and triad coming to really give it the business. But I was wondering if you could tell people like some maybe interesting ways to get the most out of chainsaw in a rack that has maybe not 3 1 volt per octave outputs to dedicate to it.
Yeah, totally. It's I think you really hit on something there where chainsaw is allowing some polyphony or paraphony, however that's pronounced. But sequencing options maybe haven't quite caught up yet in Euro in terms of easily producing a triad of 1 volt per octave signals. There definitely are some great options out there. Like you mentioned, the Architect and Triad. I actually had that before we developed the chainsaw, and that was like the main inspiration for the chainsaw. Thinking,
oh, nice. That's good to know.
Why do I need 30 HP worth of oscillators to make chords in the background of my track. Why can't there just be one little oscillator that has 3 one-volt octave inputs? And then of course, triad is a triad is like the minimum 3 notes, like kind of the sort of minimum viable chord in a way. And it's a little simpler to kind of wrap your head around sequencing 3 versus 4 or 5 note chords.
Totally.
And then, other ways to sequence it. Quad quantizers are really fun. Because then you can like throw, I know a lot of people have like an ornament in crime or a micro ornament in crime.
Oh yeah.
And you can throw just like stepped random voltages into the inputs of 3 quantizers all set to the same scale. And then it'll make like random interrelated chords. That's
a really good idea.
A demo on the Maestro playlist on our YouTube that has Maestro playing stepped random into a quad quantizer into the chainsaw. So I'll give you an idea.
I'm going to have to pull. I just took the ornament and crime out of the smaller rack, and now I'm going to have to put it back in because that sounds rad.
That's a great one. Or I always have to plug the NerdSeek. I use one of these tracker NerdSeek sequencers, and there's been some incredible polyphonic sequencing firmware updates recently for that thing.
No kidding.
Where you can
choose
chords and you can actually do live MIDI polyphonic MIDI recording. So you can just have a MIDI keyboard and like record it into the NerdSeek, and it'll all kind of auto hocket those notes through the outputs, the 1 volt per octave outputs.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So that's a good one. Yeah. I honestly think like, especially like an ornament in crime or even a micro ornament in crime, especially is almost worth having just to leave it in quad quantizer mode, and just use it as like a nice, slim, kind of easy to program quad quantizer, because there's just so many cool things you can do with that.
Shifty works really, really well for it. I can confirm that. And one of the fun things about that, especially with Renee, because Renee can be pretty probabilistic in how it moves through. So you can change your snake mode, you can change the notes going to it, and then you have the ability to gate Shifty in any particular way that you want. So what I was doing was like creating triads out of the notes that Renee could pass through, feeding it different kind of gates, and then I was I'd just be on the quantize page for the sequence that was running into Shifty and change a note now and then. And I was able to move from like, a bass triad to like a suspended to like an inversion. Yeah. And it was really cool. It felt really, really cool.
Yeah. Something I really like doing with the chainsaw is doing like a duad. So, or if that's even a word, like 2/3 of a triad, into 2 of the 1 volt per octave inputs, and then like an arpeggio into the 3rd, but then envelope it all with one, obviously with one, it's only got a stereo output. So just with one envelope, and you get these kind of, it doesn't sound like anything anyone would play on a keyboard, because you can't really play a keyboard like that, but it's got its own kind of texture. I was
wondering what I was going to end up using, because I mean, obviously I was going to throw triad, the W&E triad at it, but now I'm going to have to try that with Architect going into one of the channels.
One of the inputs.
Also, it sounds, so I mean, obviously with Chainsaw, like if you go for a really traditional sort of like quick attack and then, medium decay, especially with a filter envelope, you get a really classic saw or square chord sound.
Yeah.
But when I increased the attack and decay of my filter envelope and just got this wonderful wash going through the filter, it was really, really nice. It seems like it would be just as happy doing, those classic sort of trance or deep techno stabs as it would be doing ambient stuff, especially through a nice reverb or delay afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think I like to look at the super saw, and honestly, super saws show up in way more music than kind of trance music and hard electro. It's all over pop music, It's all over. Like you can really make, ambient swells, like you were saying, just because it's a high harmonic content waveform. So there's just a ton for a filter to chew on, and lots of great, mid cutoff closure kind of sweet spots in there with all of those, all of the harmonics of the many saws.
And you can switch it to square mode too if you want to get a more hollow sort of approach, which is always nice. I love a good square wave.
I hope people are able to see it as more versatile in that sense.
I think one thing that could be interesting, I mean, you mentioned sending an ARP to one of them. Now I'm like, well, I could just send 3 completely separate pitch sequences to each one if I wanted to, and have like a triple ARP, but that's all going through the same VCA, which I think could be really, really fancy.
Yeah, or even drone it just through a filter and like modulate the filter cutoff and have a kind of washy, reverby morphing sequence and whatnot. Yeah.
I have it running through the Qubit Prism, which has a decimate that has a bit crusher on it.
Oh, cool.
And the combination of that particular oscillator sound and like a nice, low pass resonant filter, it just sounds fucking great. It sounds really good.
Yeah. We do plan on, I have to plug, like making something that helps you sequence the chainsaw too. I think we
really?
we have to help out in that sense now that we've opened up 3 1 per octave. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. But it sounds like there's a few options out there. And it sounds also like if you approach it creatively, you don't even really have to think about it necessarily as just a triad maker. It can be a lot more than that.
Totally. And we hope that it opens up new forms of kind of harmonic exploration with chords for people, like using these stepped random voltages through quantizers. You're going to get chords that you would never play if you had a keyboard, even if you're a talented keyboardist, if you had a keyboard in front of you. Yeah.
And there's an interesting approach to, putting some theory into play where you can think of, each voice on the chainsaw as sort of a different voice and almost like a fugue. Like, you can have your bass voice, your mid voice, and your treble voice and treat them like that too. So maybe there'll be some like switched on Bach going through the chainsaw here at some point. That happened and it's good. And then y'all decided to go do the Maestro. Tell me about how that came to be, both from, I guess just where did the idea come from first?
Yeah. I had started to, I'm trying to think of the timing here. We've been working on the Maestro for a long time. It's a much, much more complicated module than the chainsaw, just from a software development standpoint, from a UX design standpoint, making sure, every time you hit a button and then hit another button, it does what you think it's supposed to do. So we went through a lot of testing and a lot of a bit of iteration, though we had the idea pretty well figured out early on that we wanted to do tempo synchronized modulation that stays tempo synchronized kind of no matter what you do with it and no matter how much we wanted to make a module that was fun to physically play with and like change with your hands a lot during while I guess performing your instrument, your modular.
Yeah, but absolutely.
But with some kind of, I guess you could say, guardrails on it, where you never get like way out of phase or totally off beat with what you're doing. And because in like the end of last year, I'd started performing live with modular with the Untitled Beat Collective group in Seattle.
Yeah. EasyBot. Yeah.
Totally.
I'm in that Discord, but then y'all remember that you were too.
And that was
really
so much fun.
Good people.
And super insightful for me as a product developer, thinking about like, when you're up there on a stage and it's really dark and you can see what's going on because I have a little light, but it's things are moving fast. There's lots of lights going. There's, the visual artists in Untitled are incredible with their projectors, making us look really cool. But it also means that, the rack has to be, you can't be fiddling with anything too closely, or you're just gonna, like, at least for me, it takes me out of the zone, and it's kind of stressful too, because everything's, people are dancing, hopefully, or beginning to dance, and you don't want to stop that. You don't want to mess that up. At least for me, that's in a live performance situation. That's what I want to see.
Absolutely. It's like being a DJ, but you have like 1,000,000,000% more responsibility.
Yeah, like a DJ with 18 CDJs. Thinking about simplifying that experience and creating things that you manually bring modulation, you can manually bring in and out really flexibly over the course of your performance, with the save slots and loading.
And the mutes.
And the mutes, yes. The mutes are key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like even like you can save a save slot with channels muted.
Oh.
And then when you load it, they'll be muted, and then you can like bring them in as you want. So that's I think kind of a nice mechanic in the module. And then, of course, both Michael and I use like Ableton. I've used Logic in the past, making music in DAWs, and automation lanes are so important for making dynamic electronic music on the computer. Just making sure things are changing over, the course of 16 bars. It's not just exactly the same thing over and over. There's some form of subtle change. And we didn't see a lot of modules that kind of, from a user interface standpoint, easily facilitated like slow change over long periods of time that like you still have control over and know like kind of when it's going to end, and then it's all going to be lined up. So that's
right. We're not talking about like LFOs or the sort of like non-quantized events. This was specifically about a certain amount of determinism that you could rely on in a performance situation.
Totally. So the slow button and being able to turn those multiplications of Maestro into like clock divisions, where things get the waveforms get really, really long, but because you know how Maestro works while you're using it, you just know in the back of your mind like it all lines up. It's not gonna.
So I haven't gotten deep enough in it to know exactly what that means, but do you mean that in Maestro where you can chain individual modulation shapes with different beat sync timings.
Yeah.
If you hit the slow button, does the entire chain slow down?
It does.
Ooh,
yeah.
shit.
So
okay.
you can like, and every control, maybe with the exception of like save, load in the clock menu, every other control we look at as like a performance control, like a jamming control. So jam the mutes on and off, jam jam on slow, like go slow and then go on, back to a multiplication and then slow. And you can really, you can, I'll be putting up some more videos about this to kind of explain it with my fingers and the sound. But I think that's where Maestro shines, is turning things on and off yourself in accordance with what's happening with the music.
Yeah. Anything that sort of like seemed like a good idea when you started and then didn't come to fruition in a way that you expected. It's packed with very, very intelligent approaches to what it does. So if that just sort of like came out of your brains, then that's awesome.
I'm trying to think if there was anything that really shifted. And one thing I can think of was the channel inputs. For the longest time, we weren't totally dialed in on like what exactly we wanted those to do. For a while, we were thinking, oh, they're like individual clock inputs, so you could like clock channels at different rates, which now you actually still kind of can with it being the one-shot mode. But when that clicked, we were thinking, oh, well, this can be an envelope generator as well. I think that's been something I've really been exploring recently in my patching with it, is allowing you to go like in and out of Maestro using the channel inputs and the outputs. Like you can self-patch channels. So a chain on one channel is driving a one-shot waveforms on another channel. And if you change the timings on either one, you get like different results in terms of timing and
so the inputs, they act as triggers for the chain. Is that sort of like the methodology behind it?
Yeah. So when you don't have a cable plugged into a channel input, it's essentially like free running. So a half note down ramp will just go like down ramp for 8 clock pulses again and again and again. Versus when you have a cable, like a trigger signal patched into the input of that half note down ramp channel, it will do that half note down ramp at the same timing
rate.
Same rate, but only when a trigger comes in.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's
it's
fucking
kind
rad.
of an envelope generator in that sense.
Yeah.
And it will re-trigger, so it'll like,
it gets triggered. Does it? So then it continues to exist in the cycle that has been set off until it gets re-triggered again. Is that sort of the idea?
Exactly. So it'll get triggered and then decay and then stay at 0 volts or negative 5 volts if it's in bipolar mode until you trigger it again. And if it's
this is huge. This is absolutely huge.
Thank you. If there's a chain applied to it, it'll cycle through each waveform in the chain.
Oh my goodness.
Per trigger. So that opens up some really cool like envelope generator.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
Options where you can have, I make a lot of demos using it on filter cutoff because it's really easy to hear. So it's easy for the viewer to kind of imagine what's going on. And, that's really fun when it's almost like, I guess you could, with a sequencer, you could sequence a slope generator to go like, down, up ramp, down, up, but you'd have to sequence the rise and fall times really carefully. Whereas this just lets you do it with a chain. And then, you can build some really crazy, like up ramp, high, down square, random, really weird modulations, then even mix them together too. That's something I've been doing a lot.
In performance, the ability to increase and decrease the complexity of the events happening in your rack at once in some meaningful way is a really cool way to be able to move from like high energy and high density to more chill stuff. So I was using, like I said, like bipolar voltage to increase or decrease either the skip probability of Pamela's new workout, which was feeding a lot of things in my rack, or increase the density of like the number of steps in a Euclidean pattern. So you could go from like really sparse to really full and then back again. Being able to do that exact same thing with the modulation density through the triggers of Maestro, that's going to be huge. That's going to be really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you do with it. I think it pairs really well with any trigger sequencer in that sense. Like you almost don't, I mean, you could still sync the clock, I guess, with your trigger sequencer so that everything, all the envelopes that you are triggering are still like meaningful divisions of your clock.
Synced. Yeah.
Your clock time. But yeah, so you're like, you can even have all of the channel inputs used. So you're controlling at that point, you're kind of just changing, using the channel controls and the timing and waveform controls to change the type and the duration of the envelopes and the waveforms.
It gives you an opportunity to think about modulation as a arrangement tool almost, like as absolutely part of the music. And like you mentioned filter cutoff sweeps, and like especially with, I mean, this all comes together because like Chainsaw going into Prism with different flavors of modulating the filter cutoff of Prism, and now knowing that I'm able to control those through triggers going into Maestro, I think that opens up a lot of really interesting like full turn on a dime sort of topology changes in the arrangement that you can immediately sort of like play with, which is really, really cool.
Totally, yeah. It's that's what we're hoping for.
Well, that's exciting, and I got out of that what I wanted, which was some sort of like the from the horse's mouth tips and tricks for the whole thing.
We love that we're getting the word out there more. It's a complicated module. Everybody's going to use it a little differently. I'm going to keep making videos and hope to see, hopefully something from you at some point. And
definitely,
and from all sorts of people just to see how everyone's using it. And I'm sure there's going to be people who find ways to use this in ways that we never would have thought of. And that's probably the most exciting part about making Eurorack products and music technology in general, is that there's this enormous wide open world that you release your little creation out into, and then people take it and run with it in every direction. It's so cool.
Did you want to talk more about COVID? I feel like we kind of nailed that down. If you have anything that you want to specifically say to people about, like, how you guys are dealing with making modules to meet demand or anything like that, that might be good.
I mean, first and foremost, thank you to everyone for buying modules these days and being so supportive of our, all the tiny little companies in Eurorack. It makes a huge difference in our lives and lets us keep doing what we love to do, which is make these wacky little music making devices for you. And also thank you for your patience for us being out of stock for like months at a time. I think a lot of other manufacturers that I've talked to during this time are in the same boat of like rejiggering their manufacturing strategies and finding new sources for parts and trying to keep things moving as best as we can. So really, really grateful for all of your support and all of your patience.
Do you guys have anything on the horizon that you want to hint at? I mean, it's obviously a weird time to be trying to make something new. And you did just come out with the Maestro, so
we're still working.
No pressure.
Yeah, still getting that out there, still getting all the kind of support. And we released the manual recently, which was a big milestone to get out for the Maestro. Going to keep making some videos, refining the manual over time. We are working on an oscillator that we're really, really excited about. Can't say much more than that about it yet. It's still getting the first prototype together, but
that's exciting.
It's a lot of really fortuitous things came together for this product that I think are going to be really, really special.
Hell
and yeah, just kind of still working through the same philosophy of putting together like a, lap-sized rack that can pump out hours of interesting music, and we're building that piece by piece as we go. So we'll be
so at some point we're going to have the acid rain shared system that we can expect.
Yeah, so maybe something like that. Exactly, something about that size.
Hell yeah. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Do you want to do anything with the rack?
Yeah.
Do you want?
I could go through a little patch I put together here with the Maestro.
I would love that.
Just to kind of explain what I'm doing and how I'm thinking about it. Little Ryan in the corner now. And and everybody should be able to see the rack here. So I have a kind of small composition of modules put together here alongside the Maestro, making kind of a funky arpeggiator voice using the Architect, the noise engineering Laquelic Ateritas, like we were talking about earlier. Incredible complement to the Maestro. It's got just so many CV inputs that that morph the sound in such like beautiful, meaningful ways that
it's an incredibly diverse module in terms of sound.
Totally. And then the herb verb as well, being an effect that can really push and pull with modulation. So I'll kind of show you. So I have all the channels muted here, which is why we're not hearing anything, even though the maestro's running. I'll unmute all of them and give you an idea of what the whole patch sounds like. Kind of a West Coasty, like...
Yeah, that's awesome.
Morphing thing. So muting him again, I'll go kind of channel 6 to channel 1 here and walk through what's going on in the patch. So channel 6 and channel 5 are kind of the gate and envelope for this patch. So channel 6 here, and you can see by the illuminated LEDs, is a square waveform at an 8th note timing, so just a straight clock you can see on this LED. And then channel 5, the output of that is patched into the step input of Architect. So it's like the clock for Architect driving it. And then the new note output on Architect, which is just kind of a copy of that step input, is driving the one-shot input of channel 5, which is a down ramp 8th note timing. So I can change that and make a shorter envelope, a really short envelope, longer envelope. So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you can have different envelope timings that you can jam through. And when you jam through them, they all stay synchronized.
So what is, just out of curiosity, what does a slow sound like on like an 8th note envelope or a 16th note envelope?
Sure. So it's like inverse. So they get slower they get faster as you go up from half to quarter to 8th to 16th, and then they get slower as you go up if you have the slow button on. So you could, there you go. Yeah, so you can kind of make a longer envelope that you can suck back to.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Jamming. Channel 5 is a
that's nice.
Slow, so a very slow up-down waveform that is, the output is patched into the fold input of Liquelica Terratas. So you can see as that LED comes on, the timbre of Liquelic changes and then goes back down. So you
That's
can
awesome.
You can have some of Maestro's, and then back down there, some of Maestro's outputs going really, really slowly, kind of in the background of your patch, and making things kind of morph over time. Let's see here. Oh yeah, channel 3 is an interesting one here. So I'm actually going to turn off channel 4, mute it, and then unmute channel 3, and it is a smooth random 1/16. So it's like also it's a smooth random 1/16 that's clocked or triggered in one-shot mode from the new output of Architect, which is also like a copy of the kind of the step input. And that's creating like a slewed random voltage that changes every time a trigger comes in. So kind of like a whoop, 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 whoop. And you can change the speed of the slew by changing the timing settings on Maestro. So, and that's patched into the size input on the herb verb. So it's changing.
Oh yeah. So does the slew is at the beginning of each iteration of the random voltage. It slews up or down to where it is now from where it was before?
Yeah, it slews to the next random. It's a to get nerdy, it's a sinusoidal interpolation between the random values. So it kind of it generates random point values and then interpolates between them at different speeds. So if it's a faster like that, you can hear it kind of like.
That's really cool.
Yeah, versus a slower. It's kind of a softer transition in that size parameter. Let's see. So we can turn channel 4 back on. Channel 2 is a let's see, a slow square waveform. That is actually we'll turn on channel 1 here as well, because it's channel 1 is a slow stepped random that's going into the note input of Architect, and that basically is changing the sort of chord it's arpeggiating through. So randomly within the quantization settings or scale setting that I'm on with Architect, it's randomly. As you can hear, I have to stop talking at some point. But
yeah.
And
so this goes back to what we were mentioning earlier about using random voltages into a quantizer to get interesting results. This is kind of doing that to an extent.
Totally. And then channel 2, like I was saying before, is a slow square that goes into the random input in Architect, which when that's high, that gate is high, it creates like kind of random stepping inside of that arpeggiation. So it's a little less just repetitive, going up and down. And now what's neat about Maestro is you can load up a brand new patch that's
and
all
it completely changes it.
Related to what I was doing there, but I like made some changes and saved it in another save slot. And now, so Maestro is also kind of a trigger and gate sequencer in a way. So on channel 6, instead of that like 16th or 8th note, just like straight ahead square rhythm like a clock, it's playing a chain of square and low waveforms. So you can go like square, low, square, low, square, 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 and that's like
basically create a gate sequence.
Pattern.
Yeah.
And what's really neat about that is, not just to do it at one timing, but then you can.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you can change the timing of it.
That's so cool.
And then manually jam out on that. So it's like the same trigger sequence stretched twice as long.
Yeah.
Or even longer. And this can really show like that slewing that I was talking about here with the smooth random. Or we can go, turn the slow button on and it really slows down. So yeah, that's the idea. You can attenuate, use an external attenuator, attenuverter, to adjust any of these voltages, which will, if you put that in between some of the Maestro's output and some of these parameters, it'll create a whole another dimension on what you're modulating. Use a Maestro output and two Maestro outputs and a VCA, and modulate one of the output signals with the output signal of another, and you can.
I was wondering what it'd be like to run a couple of the chains into maths, into the 2 and 3 channels, and get comparator outputs and inverses out. So you could do stuff like that. Like, there's just a lot of possibilities.
Totally.
And the fact, like, it's probably really easy to get chaotic with this type of like approach to modulation, but I think because everything does remain synced, that you'll always kind of have that cool like on beat relationship, which is nice.
Yeah, we hope that for most that keeps the wheels on the car enough to keep things kind of intelligible as you patch. So
yeah. Thanks. That was an awesome demo. I hope that wetted people's whistle. I know that EasyBot has a really great video on it as well.
He does. Yeah.
That I recommend everyone go check out. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking some time. I'm looking forward to diving into these myself a bit more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's picked up a chainsaw or a Maestro, and we would love to hear what you're doing with it. So tag us if you post anything. We're on a bunch of Discords, or I am at least, and at me and and let's chat about modules.
Hell yeah. Well, you take care of yourself, and good luck with that new oscillator. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, take care.
All right.
Bye.